Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Yes, welcome back. Another edition of Talking Books and Writing and Music and Songs and stuff like that here on Talking Books and Stuff. And today we have with us Steve Ivings. That's Ivings, I-V-I-N-G-S. And he is a comedian, an impressionist, an actor, an MC, a radio announcer, public speaker, recording artist, comedy writer, playwright, author, lyricist, director, and producer. In other words, he can't hold a steady job. Hello, Steve Ivings. How you doing today?
I'm great. You left out boy soprano, but other than that, you think you pretty much hit it on the nail there, yeah?
Yeah. And you're mainly known, I guess, for at least a lot of us, as an impressionist. And I was going to ask you the first voice that you ever sort of copied, and then I watched your at the improv show, and you said it was Richard Burton, and I'm saying, Richard Burton? How did you come up with deciding that Richard Burton was the first person you would imitate, if I can use that word, other than, a John Wayne or a Jack Benny or Burt Lancaster, somebody like that?
Yeah, one of those standard that everybody did.
Yeah.
Well, how it all came about, it was I'd always known I wanted to be in show business. As a kid, people would say, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I would say, "I want to be a movie star," because I didn't know as a kid the difference between a stand-up comedian or a movie star, or a star on a sitcom on TV or whatever. So I just wanted to be in show business. I always did. And I didn't really know what I was going to do. And round about grade 8 or grade 9, when I was 13, 14, I decided that I would be doing comedy because I had sort of developed a sense of humor, or so I thought. I know my parents didn't think so at all, but what do they know?
Right.
And so I could make my friends laugh, so I figured, well, I can make the public laugh maybe too. But I was still a kid. I didn't know what to do, and I'd written a few comedy routines. Stealing jokes from TV, as many comedians do in the beginning. And I was watching TV one night, and I'd always been interested in impressionists. I didn't realize I was, but I was. And Frank Gorshin was on TV performing on something, and I can't remember what. And I have scoured YouTube to try and find the clip, and I can't find it. But anyway, he was doing his routine where he would go from one voice to another, and he'd say, "Yes, I could become Boris Karloff, and all of a sudden I turn into Bela Lugosi, and then I am Burt Lancaster."
Yeah.
And then he all of a sudden popped into Richard Burton, and he was wearing a tux, and the spotlight hit him from above, and he went, "To be or not to be, that is the question." And I went, "That's what I want to do." It was, honest to God, it was like an Oprah moment. If it had been Oprah, Oprah would have been my first voice, but it wasn't. It was an Oprah moment. I pointed to the TV and I said, "That's what I want to do," and that's I can see it clearly in my mind's eye how that happened. And I at that point the movie Camelot had come out, which starred Richard Harris, not Richard Burton, but Richard Burton did it on Broadway.
Right.
I liked the music. I went and bought the Broadway album, so I had been listening Camelot a little bit, and then when Frank Gorshin did the voice, I went, "That's what I want to do," and I started the very next day trying to imitate Richard Burton. I had no idea how you do it, but apparently I did it the right way. You need 2 tape recorders. You listen to the original, and then you try and imitate it on the other tape recorder, then play it back and hear where the differences are and such. Nobody told me how that's how it's done, but I did it that way, and I've learned since that's how Rich Little and Frank Gorshin and John Biner and everybody does it. So that was why Richard Burton was the first voice. And he was very popular at the time. He was married to Elizabeth Taylor, making all those movies, Cleopatra and Sandpiper and Taming of the Shrew and all that, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. So there was a lot of material available. I didn't have access to it because in those days, of course, there were no VCRs. Unless the movie happened to be on TV and you happened to be watching it at that time, you couldn't record clips. So I studied Richard Burton by getting my parents to allow me to go to bed early and then get up at 2:00 in the morning and watch The Late Show with Richard Burton on it and record my clips from that. And then once I did Richard Burton, I remember getting a piece of foolscap and, okay, what are the other voices I should do? And that's when I wrote down John Wayne, Jimmy Stewart,
right,
Humphrey Bogart, Boris Karloff, etc. But I started with Burton. I know that's a long answer.
No,
but it was a long time ago. So the story has
yes,
gotten longer as I've told it over the years. But that's why Richard Burton was the first voice.
Now, you said this sort of happened more or less grade, 8, whatever. Without getting too personal, had your voice changed at that time?
Well, actually, it's interesting because it hadn't.
Ah.
And so all of my first attempts to do Richard Burton, I sounded more like Kirk Douglas, to be or not to me, that But it was a point where all of a sudden I did get some control of it, and but that was definitely a factor in the beginning, because Richard Burton, of course, had a very deep voice. But then I took master of my voice, and I was able to continue learning the voices without too much problem.
And when did you finally realize that you were good at this kind of thing? Or did you?
Well, or
are you still working on it?
It took a while. Yeah, it took a while, Dennis, because when I started, that enthusiasm of youth, I didn't know how bad I was. And I would listen to voices, and they were okay. I mean, you could tell who I was doing, but they weren't great yet. And that was what I really wanted. I wanted to sound as close to the voice as possible. Some comedians like Robin Williams, for example, he did all kinds of voices. You knew it was him. It wasn't him doing. It wasn't Jack Nicholson. There's no way you confuse it with Jack Nicholson. But you knew he was doing Jack because of the cadence of the voice and the nasally and all that sort of thing. And so I wanted to sound exactly like these voices. So I worked really, really hard at it. And it just was a case of playing it back on the tape recorder. And when you first hear yourself recorded, you hear, that's not my voice. That I don't sound like that.
Yeah.
And that difference between what you hear in your head and what you hear when you hear yourself on a tape recorder, when I didn't hear that within Jimmy Stewart's voice or Liberace's voice, whoever it happened to be, then I knew I'd got the voice. But I didn't know how long it was going to take or how not good I was till all of a sudden I had the courage to do it for friends at school, and they went, "Oh, that's great, you sound just like him." And then the other would go, "Well, I haven't quite got that one, Thanks a lot, buddy." Yep. But it was a great sounding board. All my friends, I mean, they were sick of me by the time I did it for a couple of months, but they were always interested in hearing it, and I got to do a lot of training, just trying to make my friends laugh with all the different voices.
And they're at that age, they're brutally honest in more ways than one. So, Steve, you suck, or whatever, right? They're not going to sugarcoat anything. Yeah. So what?
That's right. Yeah.
And let's see. I'm going to combine these two questions. Kind of, what's inspired all of this? The listening audience is the fact that I do a history thing on LTD radio, and I was flipping through an old newspaper and I saw an ad for Steve at a club in Nanaimo. Now, what was your first pro gig?
Actually, I remember my first pro gig. I had started. Well, first of all, my connection with radio is there used to be a hello line on CJVI, one of the local Victoria radio stations, and you could call up and say hello to your friends. So I used to call up every Saturday night as Ed Sullivan. And I like to say hello to all my friends out there, Topo Gijo and Buddy Greco, and stupid stuff. But it became a traditional thing on Saturday nights, and if my friends and I were going to do anything, we didn't do it till at least 8 o'clock because I had to be on the air sometime between 7 and 8. And it was just a case of phoning up and, luck of the draw, getting on the air. When that ended, I contacted the other two radio stations in town and CFAX Radio showed an interest in having me come down and just make a demo tape of my voices, and then they used me the next day, coincidentally enough, with an Ed Sullivan bit on the morning show.
With Barry Bowman, right?
Barry Bowman, the morning announcer.
Yep.
Yes, Barry called me up as Ed Sullivan, and we talked about, because the Ed Sullivan show was going off the air, so we did a little bit with that. And then I started doing regular things on CFAX. And so fast forward till I graduate and I get a job at CFAX. And one of the salespeople at CFAX, a guy named Ted Cowie, who is still a friend of mine on Facebook. We chit-chat every now and then.
Yep, me too.
Ted booked me for a gig on, it was near Christmas time, I know, and it was at the Queen Victoria Inn, which doesn't exist anymore in Victoria, and I was going to be paid all of $50 to go there and entertain for half an hour.
Wow.
Well, I didn't really have a half-hour act, so I had to kind of whip something together. I had a good solid 10 minutes, but I needed to come up with another 20 to get through it. But that was my first paying gig. I remember getting paid $50 for that, and as I was actually working that night, the all-night shift at CFAX, and I was walking back after the gig, and some car drove by, and it was very snowy and slushy, and he sprayed all the side of me with all this gunk, and I was wearing my one dress stand-up suit, so I'm going to get this dry clean. There goes my $50.
Right. Well, $50 is probably more than you got paid for a month at CFAX anyway, because I worked there the same time.
I just used to get it all in contra.
Right, right. Contra, radio term for a trade out, where you get stuff instead of money, and because nobody in radio no owners want to pay you anything anyway. Yeah, CFAX
of course not. Here's a bunch of gift certificates. Have a great Christmas.
Yeah, right. Or here's a turkey we got from Safeway.
Yeah.
So,
yes, the Safeway turkeys, of course. Well, the CFAX and Safeway had a really long association, and that's possibly why Safeway doesn't exist anymore. But anyway, I digress.
Like you digress. Anyway, yeah. So, yes, dear listener, Steve, I don't know if I actually met you at CFAX, because I was there till 71, then went down the street to CKDA till 73, and then came back to Victoria in 75, and then went to Vancouver in 76. But I worked with Ted Cowie at CFAX and also at CFUN, so.
Sure, yeah.
So,
he's been in Vancouver for years.
Yeah, so we kind of bounced around at the same time. So back to your mainly known for impressions. Now, is it impersonation or impression? Which is the actual description?
Well, I always like the name the word impersonation, because it's more encompassing. I mean, you can do an impression of somebody by just raising your eyebrow or tilting your hat or something like that. Whereas impersonation, to my mind, you're going more into the character, the walk and the talk and the facial expression and trying to think like them. You're inhabiting the character more, to my mind. I remember once, just for whatever reason, because I used to do this, I was walking around my house and I was doing George Burns. No idea why. I just happened to think of George Burns. So I'm walking around the house, and I'm going to go in the kitchen and maybe make myself a cup of tea or something. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. And I get into the kitchen, and I'm walking slow, and I'm doing George Burns, and I stopped, and I all of a sudden went, wait a minute, you're not George Burns. I was so into it that for just a couple of seconds, I'm thinking I'm George Burns in the kitchen making myself a cup of tea. And it was the strangest thing. I sort of came out of it and went, oh, whoa, I was really into that. And it was almost scary in for a little while,
Right.
Thank God I wasn't doing Carol Channing or something. That was a whole other career choice anyway.
So how did all of this develop into a full-time actual career? Because that's what you've been doing ever since high school, right?
Yep. Well, the radio thing was kind of my parents have something to fall back on. Little did they know what radio was going to be as far as something to fall back on. But that again is that's for another chat another day.
Exactly.
I was doing the radio thing and doing performing on the side, and because I worked for a radio station, my name was sort of out there, and a lot of people had heard of me and heard me doing the bits on the radio. So I would get these occasional requests to come out and do a show, do 20 minutes, do half an hour. So I started putting together an act and working on new voices, and I was constantly working on new voices all the time. and trying to find new voices to do, not just the standards, which you kind of have to do. People expect John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart and Jimmy Cagney and all those guys, but they also expect some unusual ones. So I was working on that all the time, and then it just got to the point where I was doing a lot of gigs around town, and a local agent by the name of Paul Massioli contacted me. Well, actually, I think we were working on a project together, and he said, I'd really be interested in managing you. And we sat down and worked out a deal. And then I don't think I was in radio at that point. And so he said, yeah, get ready to work because I'm going to send you everywhere. And then all of a sudden, that's how it started. I used to charge $75 for a gig at that point, and first gig he got me was for $250. So I thought, okay, this is working out well. I'm all right with this. And then I started, traveling, and I would do local stuff here, and I would do Vancouver a lot, which is great, just hop on a ferry back and forth. But then I started traveling and going up and down the coast, and then into Alberta and Saskatchewan, Manitoba. Did a lot of stuff through there because Paul had a connection in Calgary who was an agent who booked a lot of stuff in there. So it kind of built from there and just spread out, and all these agents were booking me. So I was on the road quite a bit. Never a solid on the road thing. It would I'd do a gig, maybe two if they were located near each other. Then I'd come home for half a week. Then I'd fly out and do a weekend somewhere else and come back. So it was a lot of traveling back and forth. And I'm terrified of flying.
Oh.
So, well, no, actually, I'm terrified of crashing. The flying part is
flying's
fine.
Okay. It's
but I didn't like the traveling, but it was a necessary evil to get where I needed to go. Some places, you flew somewhere and then took a bus there. It was that remote. But, I went where the work was, and that's how it all started. It just started building, and that's how I earned my living. And it got, I had an album out, and I played Vegas, and I got to do cruise ships. So there was a lot of good stuff that came with it as well.
And the album was nominated for a Juno Award, which is like top of the line here in the frozen north, where I'm sitting, it's 28 degrees Celsius, which is pushing 90. So we're not that frozen, people. And it was going to be called The Godfather's Greatest Hits, but then you decided, no, that's no good. So you're going to call it Telly Savalas Sings Songs from Hair. So no, that's no good either. But favorite tunes from I can't read it. But
favorite tunes of the Ayatollah, because at that point the Ayatollah had all music in Iran at that point. So that was the humor there. That was how topical I was in those days.
That's great.
I just right on top of it.
So playing Las Vegas, where did you play in Las Vegas? Tell us about that.
Well, I played a couple of places in Vegas. Originally, I went down there and did a show at a place called the Silver Slipper, which doesn't exist anymore, and hardly either do I. But anyway, there was an Elvis impersonator there, and they wanted an impersonator to open for him. So, and he was connected to Paul Massioli. So that's how I got that booking. And then I played the Landmark. And then I did the MGM Grand in Reno and Vegas both, which was great. And that was about the extent of my Vegas stuff. I did a few little individual private things down there, but that was where I played down there, and that was great fun. It was kind of terrifying at first because, my God, it's Las Vegas. But it was well, actually, the first time I went down there, the airline lost my luggage.
Oh no!
So I had to, which is so cliche, but I had to go. I had to find a tuxedo rental place to get something to work in that night, which fortunately I was able to do. But otherwise, I'd have been on stage in jeans and sneakers, which was fine with certain comedians, but that's not how I work. Right. Anyway, I played down there a few times, and it was great fun. And the audience is right with you from the beginning because they're there to be entertained, and they're usually a little bit looped, so that makes it even more easy to perform for.
Yep. And cruise ships, what's that like? Is it as fun as people think it is, or is it, oh my gosh, you're walking down the hallway and some guy comes up to you and says, "Hey, Steve, I got a great idea. Why don't you do Jimmy Stewart?" or whatever, or he tells you a joke.
Yeah. Oh, you know this guy. I've met that guy many times. Cruise ships are great from an entertainment standpoint. Again, the audience is there ready to be entertained, and they have wonderful, the ones that I work, they have wonderful staging and lights and sound, and the stage is pretty cool. The one downside for the entertainer is, I think the longest I did was 2 months, and that was it's a really small ship when you're on it for 2 months, and you're traveling. In this case, it was a weekly thing, so every week was new passengers on there. Who looked an awful lot like the old passengers who had just left. It was hard to tell, but they were great. Every audience that was there was great. But yes, you're right. Before you've done a show, it's great because you're anonymous. Nobody knows who you are. But once you've done a show, then I mean, there's a lot of people, and that's great. They come up and say, "Hey, really liked your show last night." There is the odd person who says, "I got this idea for you here. You clean this up and you can use it in your act." And he tells you this joke that you couldn't possibly clean up.
Right.
And so I can't use in the act. I remember there was one guy on a cruise ship, and I did this bit as Sean Connery, and talking about...
That's right, Alex.
Well, originally... Oh, there's so many people think they can do Sean Connery.
Exactly.
Anyway,
Not me.
I had this bit that I did where Sean Connery talks about the sport of curling, which was invented by the Scottish.
Yes.
Because they were too cheap to buy hockey sticks. That's my line. Anyway, and Sean Connery talks about a lot of people don't know that the sport of curling was invented by the Scottish. And, you get the rock and you throw it along the ice, and that's how it all was invented. And, they would wait for the rivers to freeze and throw the rock along the ice. The Irish tried it, but they'd forget to wait for the river to freeze. But that's the Irish. Anyway, I did this bit, and this guy stopped me in the hall the next day, or on somewhere on deck, and he said, your show's great, blah blah blah, but Sean Connery's Welsh. I said, well, I don't think so. And this goes back before the internet. I couldn't just pull my phone out and show him that Sean Connery was Scottish, born in Edinburgh, and he was insisting, and I couldn't figure out why he was thinking that. Now, at the time, Timothy Dalton was playing James Bond. He's Welsh. Maybe the guy got confused, but he was insisting that Sean Connery was Scottish. So, when there's no way to prove it, I just kind of said, well, maybe you're right. I'll check into that.
Right.
And of course, let him go on his merry way because he was obviously mistaken. But that's the sort of negative that happens when you get people who want to get into a discussion with you, and you have to be polite, have to be nice, and which is not a huge problem. The guy wasn't being offensive or anything, but you don't want to say anything to offend anybody when you're working on a cruise ship because they are the passengers. They're there for their vacation, so you want them to enjoy themselves. It's just a very small place to be. Even on a huge cruise ship, it's a very small place to be if you're there for too long a time. The rest of it is great. Food, wonderful.
Yep.
The last cruise ship I was on, I actually lost 15 pounds. I just, in an effort to fill my day, I went to the gym for an hour and a half every day, and I actually lost weight on a cruise ship, which is difficult to do if you've ever been on a cruise ship.
How is that possible?
Food every 10 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, at least nobody came up, or maybe they did, and told you the aristocrats and told you to put that in your act.
No, that would have been funny. I would have enjoyed somebody telling me their version of that.
What about on the personal side? How does this, like, you have a family and a home in Victoria and stuff, but still you're working from basically job to job. You're in a gig economy for your entire life. How does that affect the other side, the real Steve Ivings side?
Well, I've been fortunate that there's always been, there's going to be times where there is a lack of work, but hopefully it's made up for it by, a lot of work at some, drips and drabs, and all of a sudden you get, boom, a whole bunch of work together, and it just all evens out. I'm fortunate in my current circumstance that my wife is, a school teacher, and she also works with the school board, so she's got a pretty good job, and except in the summertime when she doesn't.
Right. And nobody understands that. Teacher. Yeah, school teachers don't get paid from, I had some friends in Vancouver in the 70s who they didn't get their first paycheck till the end of September. So, you got to do something to fill up those months.
one plans ahead. That's the only thing to do in that particular circumstance. But the past couple of years, because of COVID, though, has been a real issue. Yep. And there was a whole chunk of time. I was supposed to produce a show, actually, that was going to run round about mid-April or May of 2020. Actually, we were on our way down to Vegas for a vacation the week that they closed Vegas because of COVID. So COVID caused a real rift there. Fortunately, again, my wife was in a situation where she was teaching from home, so she was still getting paid, just doing it remotely. So that worked out. For the most part, I've always, it's what I do for a living. And when she met me and our kids were raised, it was the case of this is what Daddy does. So sometimes he's going to be here, sometimes he's not going to be here. But if he's not here, that means we get to eat next week. So see, there's a plus side.
There's a plus side. Right? So you're still hard at it from your office in Victoria, creating, producing, and performing. So what do you got planned, in the distant, in general terms, are you still just knocking yourself out, or are you kind of slowing down a bit, or how's it working like that?
Well, what I've been doing in recent years is I've been producing variety shows. It started because I actually worked in a show called The Smile Show that ran here in Victoria.
At Bouchard
British
Gardens.
pub show. Yeah, ran all summer long. And I learned an awful lot from them. I love that format. I used to love variety shows growing up, watching them on TV,
right.
Jackie Gleason, Red Skelton, all of those shows. So I started producing some locally, and I have been for over 20 years now, starting with a Broadway show. And I did a show called Around the World in 80 Minutes, which is essentially a world cruise, a world tour, with songs, dances, and comedy sketches. So we go to Hawaii and we start with a comedy sketch, and then we do a song, or then we go to Mexico and do a song, or we go to France and a couple of sketches, maybe a dance number, audience participation. All the stuff is in there. So those are the kind of shows I've been producing, and they're very popular here because there's still a lot of people who have British background, and the British grew up going to the seaside in the summertime to see variety shows. So that's been relatively lucrative and great fun to do, and I love the creativity of it because I get to do a lot of comedy sketches. I usually have an impersonation or bit or two in there, and in Around the World we do Italian, and I do Dean Martin singing That's Amore. So, I get an opportunity to use the voices there that way. And the other thing that I'm doing now that I've just started working on is I'm putting together a couple of what they call our one-man shows. I've got a one-man show of Groucho Marx called Groucho Marx. Why, that's me. And it's me as Groucho on stage for 2 45-minute segments just talking about his career and doing all the Marx Brothers movies and then all the stuff that he did after that. And it's just, I'm dressed as Groucho and I'm just walking around the stage talking to the audience. And I anticipate with this one that there'll be some real connection with the audience, because years ago I wrote and produced a couple of shows that incorporated a local singing group who did the Andrews Sisters type stuff, 30s musical.
Uh-huh.
So we did a fake radio show, and then we did the sequel to that one was a TV special that they were presenting of memories of their old radio show. So it was an opportunity to get them on stage. I played the host. We had a bumbling sound effects guy named, of course, Sparky. I mean, what else would the sound effects guy be called? And So we did one musical. It was a 2-hour musical with all that music, and then we did a sequel. And I've got a third one in the works where they actually go on a cruise ship, and I'm gonna call it Radio Waves. Isn't that clever? I thought that was a very clever title.
Very
Radio
good.
Waves.
Radio Waves.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm doing the Groucho thing, and I've just started working on a script to do a Michael Caine one-man show, because it occurred to me I don't look unlike Michael Caine, and Michael Caine has spent so much of his life doing talk shows and narrating his movies, and speaking directly to the audience, that I thought, perfect, he's ideal to go out on stage and just talk to the audience and tell funny stories about his life. So those are the impersonations now. I'm thinking, well, now I'm going, okay, who else can I do? Can I do a Sean Connery show? Come in.
Yeah.
So that's the plan. That's where the writing is taking me now, rather than doing the stand-up. I mean, I do some stand-up, sure, but it's not the audience that it used to be, and I'm interested in doing something different. I've done, over 50 years of standing center stage and going, okay, here's Joey Bishop, ladies and gentlemen. Joey, or whoever it happens to be. Right. And welcome to the Lawrence Welk Follies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. So I really want to, I want to take the writing in that direction right now. That's what I'm working on.
And I guess the impressions, like impersonations, a lot of those people that you and I recognize, the kids nowadays don't know who you're talking about. So, yeah,
there's definitely that. And I remember doing a show a couple of years ago, and it was for a high school grad or something. And I said, well, Jimmy Stewart, and some kid went, who's Jimmy Stewart? And he I think he was still around. He just, wasn't doing movies that these kids would have seen. And yeah, that makes a difference. And there's not the same kind of characters that there was, in the old days. And I'm sure somebody somewhere impersonates Brad Pitt, but I couldn't tell you if they were doing Brad Pitt or not. I know I've heard somebody do Clooney, but even, George Clooney's been around for 30 years.
Yeah. Harrison Ford.
People, there's nothing about them that stands out,
Right. Well, anyway, Steve, it's been a treat, and good luck. And can we use a clip from your improv show to promote this segment?
Oh, absolutely. Gosh, yes. Oh, I remember that. I was on the air Sunday night, and I flew down to LA, and then came back to go on the air Tuesday night. They gave me Monday night off, and I flew down and did that in one night to do the improv, and then flew right back. I was a real jet setter for one day.
Oh, you mean they actually gave you time off?
Yeah. Well, and docked me pay for it, of course.
Of course, yes. Okay,
Yeah.
And good luck, and thank you very much for spending a little bit of time with us as we stroll down memory lane.
Hey, it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.